Welcome back. This is a bit of a good news story few of us saw coming. Australian students have fared better than expected amid extended lockdowns, border closures and months of learning from home. New NAPLAN results show that COVID-19 has not significantly impacted literacy and numeracy scores, which were largely unchanged from 2019. Now, I'm not saying they were fantastic in 2019, but we all expect them to be a lot worse. For his analysis, let's bring in Research Fellow in Education Policy for the Centre for Independent Studies, Glenn Fahey. He joins me now from Sydney. Glenn, I have to say I was a little bit surprised with some of these results, not all, but some of them. What's been your reaction?
Peter, good to be with you. Look, it's a surprising but reassuring result. So many of us predicted, quite understandably on the evidence that we had to hand, that we should expect to see some small decreases in achievement and progress for students, especially in those areas most impacted by lockdowns. And that's what the international research has pointed to, and even the preliminary results here at home last year. So it was with good reason that we anticipated that might be true. We should really welcome that the worst does seem to have been passed at this point, but we also have to be just as open to the fact that it's a very real risk that the worst is still ahead of us. And there's a few reasons for that. One of those is that at this point, we don't have detailed data about which students have been impacted and which ones haven't. So, of course, a big headline figure like the average result does hide a lot beneath it. So what we're most interested in is how students who started behind might have progressed, how disadvantaged students might have progressed, how Indigenous students progressed, how more regional students progressed. Our research at CIS showed that students that were in more regional areas had a much more patchy experience with home-based learning. It's likely that will have translated through to differential impacts on learning. And of course, students that started behind could easily have fallen through the cracks. So I think it's too soon to be popping a champagne bottle when it comes to these results. So I would certainly encourage everybody to keep a watchful eye on that. But also there's also the longer lagging effects as well, because as we know, students this year, not last year, will likely be in lockdown longer, harder, and more widely felt. So that is more students impacted. One example being more regional schools in New South Wales. More of those schools are shut down this year than last year. And the element of lockdown fatigue mustn't be forgotten either. This year has not had the same urgency and effort, I feel, from the education community as last year did. And that will flow through in terms of those results.
Let me just jump in there because I've spoken to a lot of people who are homeschooling. Last year, there was a lot more emphasis, I think, on online communication from teachers and engagement. I know firsthand of cases where young primary school children are getting half an hour in the morning, that's it, and then half an hour in the afternoon for games, and that's optional. Your point there on regional students, I come from a very small country town. I know a lot of my family in the country say that the broadband capacity for regional students is appalling. I know kids that can't even go home in school holidays because the regional broadband is so bad. They have to stay with other family members. I have to say too, when you look at how well Victoria went with 150 days off school over this assessment period, that's a huge amount of time out of the classroom. I expected Victoria's numbers to fall off a cliff, but then someone had said to me before these NAPLAN numbers came out, don't forget mums and dads are very hands-on in the education, and they're going to be back to basics in a way that the crowded curriculum and teachers and all the fads that are now in classrooms won't be there. So it'll be a return to the fundamentals. Maybe that's perhaps why Victoria's done better than some thought.
Well, there's certainly some truth to that. So we've got to look at what NAPLAN measures and what it doesn't measure. So NAPLAN is a measure of foundational literacy and numeracy. And one of the key elements of the package to schools last year, both while students were learning from home and when they did return to school in face-to-face learning, was to really focus on those literacy and numeracy foundations and trimming a lot of the fat. Now, there's certainly some lessons to be had in all of that, because it seems that effort may well have averted some of the worse effects that we might have anticipated. But like with everything in COVID as well, I should add that just because we haven't seen impacts upon NAPLAN results doesn't mean that all other areas of education are unimpacted. So some of the commentary has indicated that education therefore hasn't been harmed. Now, of course, there are other elements, subject areas that might have had an impact that won't necessarily be seen in NAPLAN. There's all of those other leading indicators like engagement factors. And obviously, as your program and others have noted, those mental health impacts and social and emotional impacts, they might not result in an immediate impact upon education outcomes, particularly in core literacy and numeracy elements, but may well feed through to their achievement in other subjects. So I think we're certainly not out of the woods here, but I think a welcome reminder to consider that, we got better results when we focused on those fundamentals. On the fundamentals, well, mum and dads need to take a bow here. Mum and dads take a bow. I think this has been a welcome bit of good news, at least this far in the pandemic. Thank you, Glenn. Thanks for your time. Pleasure. Glenn Fahey there from the CIS in Sydney.